That's a very fantastic story. And I want to ask you as well, like from skydiving, how did you transition to base jumping? Because skydiving is it's much more advertised business in its own terms. So it's more available all over the place. But base jumping is a very narrow community. Like how would you transition from the skydiving to base jumping community?
It was a narrow community. You used to have to get a mentor. That was before my era. I was able to pay somebody out of Pine Bridge or Idaho, Tom Aiello. He was the only instructor back then. This is 12 years ago. I think it was like $1,500. I knew what I wanted to do, so I reached out to him and told him I had like 70 something jumps. And I had already done the flight 1, 2, and 3, which are canopy courses, which you learn the canopy skills. So he said, fine, come on out. And so I think I had like 75 jumps when I got there. And I threw money at it. And in our sport, the instructors, good or bad, will take that money because they need money, and they'll teach you how to jump off a cliff at the end of the day. So that's how I transitioned. But then it was like a little bit longer after that. Then it took me a while because I wanted a wingsuit and I didn't have the skills to wingsuit. So I really wasn't too interested in the base jumping part back then. I went and did a big wall course in Brento with a onesie, but that really wasn't my get down. My get down was to wingsuit. So I kind of rushed it. I probably had like only maybe 25 base jumps before I put on a wingsuit in Norway. And I was here to wingsuit. So that was over a couple of years of those jumps too. So it was like not that many. But when I started wingsuit base jumping, I had like 1,000 wingsuit jumps. So that was over a couple summers of living at Z Hills and banging out jumps when we had the money. Because when we weren't throwing our tour in the summertime, you don't throw events. It's too hot. People don't go to these events, right? So we would live in Z Hills, and you could do 100 jumps a week, whatever. Because I had 2 rigs, so you could pay packers $6 or whatever it was, and you could literally do 10 loads a day, 7 days a week out there. And it was fantastic. So you could do that for a summer, and some of the best wingsuiters, Travis Mickle, the kid, were part of my crew, so we had just an amazing group of athletes who I could just go play with all day long for entire summers. And that's how I got my numbers up. And then after that, I asked them, we were on a trip, I think in Panama, and I was like, hey, do you guys think I'm ready to go jump this wingsuit off of the cliff? And we've been doing acro, and they're like, yeah. And because I could fly my suit any orientation, head down or whatever, I could fly a wingsuit. And that was why I made the conscious decision to start wingsuit base jumping, is because I felt confident that I could fly a wingsuit. I'd done 50 hot air balloon jumps, gainers, flips, all kinds of shit. I knew that no matter what axis I was on in my body in a wingsuit, because I also free flew every day, which is like without a wingsuit, just flying artistically. I knew I could do that well, and I could fly a wingsuit. So it was time for me to put on to go put a base rig on and go jump off a cliff with it.
That's a fantastic story. I want to talk a bit just about the fear element, because when you start to skydiving, it's a very scary sport, but you have a reserve parachute, and like even the worst case scenario, it has a backup plan for that. And it's very rare to have like somebody who dies from an accident. But when you go to base jump, you only have one parachute. So you kind of have to treat this more carefully. And also I presume you have a different degree of fear. And you also have to take this more seriously. And also, as we discussed from the beginning, you have to accept the possibility of something goes wrong. How was that transition from skydiving to base jumping from a fear standpoint?
I mean, I think fear is an emotion, yeah. So if you can identify why you're afraid and what your fears are, then maybe you can work on those things to eliminate that. So if you don't understand what's happening with a canopy or a container or the deployment sequence, then you can work on it. Use skydiving as a training grounds to do that. And I think a lot of us do, for who are base jumpers. We use skydiving because there is the room for error. We try to eliminate most of the things that we have fear of as far as gear, before we arrive on a cliff. So the fear that I think needs to be separated here is there's always a fear that you're going to, maybe I wouldn't say fear, like you're only afraid while you're hiking, right? Or gearing up. When I push off that exit, there's no more fear. Like you don't have the mental capacity to be afraid anymore. Like your mind shifts, right? It's like a Formula One driver or somebody who does another extreme sport at a very high level. Like you can be nervous, I would use that word for to fear, You could be nervous, but if you did your job correctly on the hike, you're going to identify everything that you would be fearful of, and you're going to have to deal with those things in your mind before you get to putting on your wingsuit. So when you put on a wingsuit and you're standing on that cliff, I've dealt with all of those things that I would be afraid of. And now I've come to the term of acceptance. I accept that there are things out of my control that could happen, but statistically, the gear is never at fault. Like 1 in a million. It's always pilot error. All fatalities are because somebody got too close to the ground, somebody packed their shit wrong, somebody, was made a judgment error on, the conditions. They got flat, they stopped flying their suit, whatever it is. So statistically, that the gear is going to work if you do your job correctly. So now we're tying in sobriety. Why do I want to be sober? Because I don't want to have a fatality be an excuse, part of, oh, Jamie got fucked up last night. He was doing coke and Molly and he packed his shit wrong. That's not what I want to ever happen. Or he made a judgment error. I'm not saying I don't make judgment errors. I like to fly proximity. So obviously, but I try to leave margin of error. I have a rule about 90% of the time that I try to leave it out. Like, meaning if I'm flying a proximity line, I don't go actively look for lines that require me to be 100% committed that I can't get out of this terrain. So when I approach a proximity line, for me, because I love my life, we've talked about this, I don't want to die doing this sport. I try to fly proximity lines that I can fly terrain on one side, but if I don't like what's going on, I can pull away from the wall, right? And I have a room for error. There are other proximity flyers that like to go into a line where there's no outs. They have to fly this at 100% performance if they want to live. So I try to not do the latter of the two. 10% of the time I do like a good proximity line that, has that if it's epic. I do like going through narrow lines. I do like going really close to the ground as fast as possible. But when I do that, it's for me. And that's the difference. I think that it's when I fly those lines, it's because I've done it 10 times and I'm ready to lower my altitude to get to that point. It's never the first time. It's not because I saw a video and saw somebody else could do it. I have to fly it myself and understand it and work my way into that terrain. And when there's, again, technical stuff as we approach it with speed. If we're flying like shit and we approach a proximity line, then there's a good chance you're going to die because you don't have any energy. But what you don't see is how much energy we're building. And when we dive at this ground, we are forcing our wingsuits to stay low to the ground. If I did nothing and I relaxed, my wingsuit would pop up in the air because it's just, I'm defying gravity, or, it wants to float, right? Because, I'm pushing it down, my head down towards the ground. But if I relaxed, my suit would go head high again and I would start to glide more. So if you approach it from that mindset, knowing numbers, we use fly sights on our helmet so that we can know our exact distance from the rock at 50 meters, 100 meters, 150 meters. I know those numbers where I am because I've done it 100 times, and I know my worst number, and I know my best number. And when we jump, we use our worst number to say, okay, that margin, knowing that the rock is at 50 feet down there, there's a rock that sticks out 20 feet. 100 jumps say that I clear that by 10 feet. I'm okay with that. Right. But if it says, hey, at that altitude, I only clear this rock by 2 feet, that's a different margin. There are wingsuiters out there that would take that chance all the time. Statistically, they're the ones that die. Right? Because you can't get it right every time. So I and our crew try to have a mindset of let's leave that margin of error, because there is a time and a place that we push it. Obviously, on some of this alpine exits, I can't, I wish I had more room for error, but ultimately I have, 20 kilos, 40 pounds of gear in my wingsuit. I've just climbed for 2 days. It's time to get the fuck off this mountain. And so we take a little bit more chance in those environments. But there are some people that are going to Switzerland and they're taking a gondola and they're walking for 5 minutes to an exit, and they're taking 10 times more risk than I take after a project like that, because they're searching their high, their rush comes a different way. It's not right or wrong, but it just doesn't leave much room on the table for you to make a mistake and walk away from it. So our approach, because I love my wife, I love my dogs, I love my tour, is to try to find the same rush that they're getting flying 6 inches from the ground, but I like to fly 6 feet from the ground. And again, that's sobriety and dedication, the working out and the training and all those things, and having 20 friends die in the sport that have led me to this thought process.
That's something truly
90%.
That's something truly interesting, because we, mentioned at the beginning that space jumping is sport with the highest mortality rate. But now, after you mentioned that, it doesn't seem like it's a random thing that happened. It's just somebody get pulled off the balls, like, oh, this is your name, you're gonna die. It also seems like it's a mindset and also the action that they that increases or decreases your chances of surviving. If I get that correctly.
Yeah, it's pilot error. It's somebody fucked up. Somebody got greedy. Somebody wanted to get closer to the ground. Somebody did this line 10 times and it worked on those occasions. And then the 11th time, the conditions are different. They didn't take that into consideration, and they made a human error. They made a judgment call that was wrong, and that led to their death. Or somebody was following them. We've had great wingsuiters who other people have died because they were following them. And that person fucked up, so now they're both dead, right? And that's happened many times in this sport. So, one, you're accountable for your own life, and two, if we just, here's the reality, like, I love submitting our content. We make a living from wingsuiting and people watching our videos. But the truth is, people don't know when I fly 2 feet from the ground or 20 feet from the ground. To the eye, it all looks the same. It looks just as cool. So if this is my business, right? I make a living from doing social networks, also obviously other things, real estate and stuff like that. But if I'm in this for the long run, then I don't need to take those chances every day, because I know that I can create the same kind of content that's going to sell by staying 20 feet away, which means I can do this every day. It's repeatable. It's predictable, right? If I do it 2 feet from the ground, that's not predictable, right? One day, error, whether it's just a wind, updraft, whatever it may be, a thermal, it doesn't matter what it is going to set my course to death. So I like to be 10 feet, 20 feet from the wall 90% of the time, because it's a business, and I don't want to die doing my job, right? It's a dangerous job as it is. I don't need to add more risk to it.